Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel, and welcome to part 2 of my trip to Colorado. Today, I'm going to be talking about the paleontology and dinosaur related things we did on the trip, so let's waste no more time and get started. Day 1, it wasn't too eventful because we weren't in Colorado yet. Me and my mom were driven to the airport, got on our plane, and after a few hours we landed safely in Colorado. We got our rental car and drove to the hotel and fell asleep. Day 2 is when the adventure really begins. We went from our hotel in Aurora to Woodland Park, but on the way, we got to see a lot of cool landscapes with mountains and rock walls. Anyway, we arrive in Woodland Park and we go to the Rocky Mountain Dinosaur Resource Center, which is a really cool place to learn and look at dinosaurs and other extinct animals. Outside, there are two statues of a Styracosaurus and a Daspletosaurus, which look really cool, and I think every few years they get repainted. When you walk in the building, there's a Geosternbergia skeleton on top of the entrance, and then you follow a guide into the rest of the museum, and they talk a little about the place and what animals are on display, and then you go on the tour yourself. The first thing in the museum has a bunch of spinning globes that show the world as you go through time to the modern day. Then there are plenty of informational signs around the museum that talk about what a dinosaur is and what they eat and plenty more. Anyway, the museum has plenty of really good skeletons and statues of all different kinds of animals. There was a really great oviraptor head, then there was a ceratopsian skull and a Daspletosaurus skull. After that, there was a really cool Dakotaraptor skeleton with a bunch of crocodilians next to it. There was a Strangerochampsa, a Champsosaurus, and a Terminaris. And on the left of the Dakotaraptor skeleton was a juvenile Edmontosaurus skeleton, Compsognathus, Archaeopteryx, and a Rhamphorhynchus, which all look amazing, by the way. Next to that was a sauropod section with the skulls of an Apatosaurus and a Brachiosaurus. Then there was a Camarasaurus leg and a Ultrasaurus humerus. And yes, there may be some confusion between Ultrasauros and Ultrasaurus. I took pictures of all of the informational signs, and here it's talking about Ultrasaurus, so if you want to pause the video and read it, go ahead. After that, there was a Hypacrosaurus fending off a Dromaeosaurus. There were also plenty of Bambiraptors, and then there was a really cool display with a Daspletosaurus lifting an Avaceratops in the air, which looks really freaking amazing. Also in that area were some pterosaurs, like Dimorphodon, Nyctosaurus, Pterodostro, and a Quetzalcoatlus. Then in the next area, there was a Beelzebufo and a Dalatherium, a pair of Thescelosaurus, some Triceratops bones, a Pachycephalosaurus, a pterosaur, Paracyclodosaurus, and the Tyrannosaurus rex. Also in that area was a life restoration of an Albertosaurus and a Triceratops bone that was nicknamed Rex Biscuit because it had some holes in it. We ended up asking one of the staff members about it. We had a really good conversation about Tyrannosaurs hunting with their infants and stuff like that, which was really cool and neat. Then we went over to the next room, which had a lot of really cool pterosaurs, including this neat Pteranodon skeleton. Then there was a Hylaeosaurus, some Triceratops bones, a really cool looking Prestosuchus, a Nanotyrannus, a massive skull of a Torosaurus, Struthiomimus, and an Onzu, which is a type of oviraptor. Also scattered around the museum were these glass cases that had a bunch of fossils in them. Then we went into the next room, which had plenty of marine reptile fossils. There was a Megalodon mouth, a Tylosaurus, Protosphaerina, Coelacanth, Xiphactinus, Prioncheles, Megalocephalus, and a whole lot more. Trust me, there are a lot of animals in this section. Anyway, after finishing up on the museum, we went to the gift shop, and I purchased a Deinonychus claw, a Tyrannosaurus claw, and a Oviraptor claw. Then we went to the fluorescent fossil beds, which is a really cool location to go see petrified redwood tree stumps from the Triassic period as you go on a little walk and experience nature. There are plenty of great sights on the walk, and I got some really good pictures. There aren't any dinosaur bones here, but you mostly find insect and plant fossils here, which is still really cool. Then we went to the Royal Gorge Dinosaur Experience, which has a walk with animatronic dinosaurs like Allosaurus, Brachiosaurus, Ankylosaurus, Parasaurolophus, Stegosaurus, Dilophosaurus, Triceratops, Deinonychus, Theophytalia, Pachycephalosaurus, and their destroyed T-Rex animatronic that caught on fire, which was interesting. Also a funny story, before you go on the walk there is a sign that says watch for snakes, and my mom said there probably won't be snakes, and as soon as she said that, we saw a snake looking at us, which was just funny. And there was also a museum that had a lot of animals, like a small pterosaur, Thescelosaurus, Daspletosaurus, Strangerochampsa, Champsosaurus. The museum also had a Stegosaurus, Allosaurus, and a Brontosaurus, which is interesting because it was thought that Brontosaurus didn't exist until 2015, when a paper came out that proved Brontosaurus to be valid. More on that later. But either way, all of them were really cool. Then there was a dromaeosaurus hunting a little mammal and a triceratops. Then we went into the room that was dedicated to marine and flying reptiles and more. There were plenty of ammonites, Xiphactinus, Tylosaurus, Elasmosaurus, Archoon, and a Pteranodon. And that was it for day 2. And trust me, it was really eventful. Day 3, we went to the University of Colorado at Boulder to go look at the museum they had. In the museum, they had a lot of information boards around the place. They had some fossils of plants and animals, a hadrosaur femur and a fish skull, a Corythosaurus skull, plesiosaur paddles, a Tylosaurus skull, a Libidosaurus, Hypertraguus, dinosaur footprints, a fish eating a squid, which is interesting, Maricoidodon, Brontothere skull, multiple skulls and teeth, a Diplodocus skull, the lower jaw of a Torvosaurus skull, a Edmontosaurus skull and jaw with rows of teeth used for grinding plants, Hoplophonius, Dicnodonts, Archaeopteryx, Macaroprosopus, Ammonites, and a pterosaur. Normally, they have a triceratops skull, but it wasn't there and was probably displayed in a different museum. Then, we went to the Denver Museum of Nature and Science. This museum has everything science-wise. Space, ancient Egypt, mummies, rocks and minerals, animals, paleontology, and more. Outside was a statue of a Camarasaurus and a Ceratosaurus, both of which look really good. When you enter the museum, you see the amazing Tyrannosaurus skeleton, which looks really, really cool and enormous. Then they had 2 plesiosaur skeletons hanging from the ceiling catching fish, which is pretty cool. Then we went into the Prehistoric Journey exhibit, which basically is like walking through time. There's plenty of stuff there, but I didn't get many pictures of the walk, but I have pictures of some orthocones, sea scorpions, Doncolostheus, Dimetrodon, and then we entered the dinosaur area. Upon entering, you can see 2 Pachycephalosaurus in this really cool forested area. Then you can see 2 Coelophysis, a Gargoylosaurus, a Diplodocus, the famous Allosaurus for Stegosaurus display, Ornitholestes. Then there was this corner with some skulls, tails, and arms and legs, which is pretty neat, a Edmontosaurus skeleton, Triceratops skull, and a pterosaur. Then you move into the marine section with multiple fish and reptiles like Xiphactinus, a mosasaur, and a species of turtle with plenty of ammonites. Then you go into the Cenozoic, and you can see a pterobird, Brontotheres, Archaeotheriums, Elasmotherium, Paraceratherium, and a woolly mammoth. And that was a lot, but we did go see the other exhibits, and my mom really liked the mummy exhibit. Day 3 was also the day we went to the Denver Zoo and the downtown aquarium, but I've already talked about those in part 1. Day 4. This was our last day doing anything in Colorado. We started by going to Dinosaur Ridge, and we got to see the cool painted dinosaur statues, which looked really great. We went into the museum there, and we learned a lot about the Western Interior Seaway, and we saw Earth change over millions of years. They of course had plenty of fossils of animals like Diplosaurus, Elasmosaurus, Triceratops horns, Stegosaurus thagomizer, many claws, footprints, plants, and more. There were also plenty of statues like this Utahraptor. Then we went on a bus tour up a mountain, and we were told that this was the area where Stegosaurus was first discovered, which is really neat. We arrived at our first stop on the mountain, and we could see a bunch of footprints from multiple dinosaurs and animals. There were hadrosaur tracks, theropod tracks, and crocodile tracks. Our tour guide stated that these tracks were found during the Great Depression, which is a really cool and fun fact. We continued to drive up the mountain, and we saw sauropod tracks that stuck out of the ground, which was really cool to see. Then we continued driving, and we went to this area where there were real dinosaur bones sticking out of the rock, and the reason they are there is because it would take several years to get them all out. So instead, they are used to inform the public. But yeah, a really cool and informative experience. I also purchased a replica of a Tyrannosaurus rex tooth and a Allosaurus claw, both of which look amazing and are really cool. Then we went to the Morrison Natural History Museum. This was a really cool experience because I got to nerd out with a paleontologist, but more on that later. The museum had plenty of cool skeletons on display. There was a Mosasaurus next to an Allosaurus skull, then there were some sauropod bones which looked neat, then there was a Stegosaurus section with an area with baby Stegosaurus footprints, which was really cool to see, and also in that area were sauropod skulls like Camarasaurus, Diplodocus, and Brontosaurus. Now, I asked the paleontologist if Brontosaurus was valid, and he pointed out the thing I mentioned earlier about the 2015 paper. Then we went upstairs and got to see the Utahraptor that was posed as if it was cleaning its feathers, which is really cool. There was also a Geosternbergia and a Mosasaur. Then there was a Nanotyrannus next to a Tyrannosaurus rex skull, which looked really cool. And our tour guide told us we could feel the teeth of the T-Rex skull, which was really neat. Right next to that was the Triceratops skull, and what's cool about this one is you can see the veins that would have supplied blood to the frill, which would help create colors to attract mates, which is really cool. Then we entered the Cenozoic room that had a bunch of skulls of Archaeotherium, giant sloths, mammoths, saber-toothed tigers, and more. Now, in the next room, they were working on an Apatosaurus skull, and we were allowed to use an air drill to dig out some rocks surrounding the skull, which was really cool and fun. Anyway, the tour had ended, but me and the paleontologist tour guide continued to talk about dinosaurs. I asked plenty of questions about different dinosaurs like Brontosaurus, the Coelophysis and Centarsus controversy. However, I did mean to ask about Troodon being valid, but I couldn't think of that question until after we left, which is unfortunate. But yeah, it was really fun to nerd out about dinosaurs with a paleontologist. He told me about the plenty of opportunities in Colorado regarding paleontology, and it's unfortunate I don't live there, so I'll have to go back one day. Anyway, moving on to our last destination on the trip, we went to the Dinosaur Ridge Discovery Center, which is a small but cool museum. There were some dinosaur footprints, sauropod bones that you were allowed to touch, which is neat, Allosaurus bones, plant fossils, and some marine animals. And after all that, we drove back to our hotel and spent the rest of the day there. And then tomorrow, we went to the airport super early to fly back home. But yeah, that was part 2 of the trip to Colorado. I hope you guys did enjoy. Part 3 will be uploaded soon that combines part 1 and 2 together in one video. But that is going to have to wrap up this video. I hope you guys did enjoy. If you did, make sure to press the like button and subscribe. And I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye!